guys are really good at playing the straight man in your headshots.
I was just looking at my headshot, being like, "Well, the contrast is interesting." I show up in one in a suit, and here we are now,
Sorry.
not backwards in a t-shirt. It's
Gre-
definitely a Friday.
Green's our color. That's the thing. Anyway, yeah. Welcome back, everyone. It's Friday. We are watching the MSP Cyber Roundtable. I got Ryan and Scott here from ClickArmor. We'll talk more about their company later. Guys, what's the actual Friday plan? Scott, your hint was I'm going to be working all weekend. Is that real?
Well, I make it a plan not to work on the weekend. So, but I will be working pretty hard next week and the week after that, and the week
Okay.
after that until I go on vacation. But yeah, for the weekend, oh boy, it's going to be raining here. So I might be, I don't know, playing darts or something.
What about you, Ryan? You got
Again, like if it's raining, we'll have to find a list of things to get done inside the house. If not, I'm also kind of dog sitting my pooch who recently had his toe amputated. So if anyone's ever gone through that, that's a very interesting and involved process of being a babysitter for a dog for a couple of weeks. So he's my extra best friend right now.
Is there like a cone?
Oh yeah, there's a cone and the full Band-Aid and the help me, I'm so sad eyes all the time, right? So that's my life right now.
Those cones are so sad. I was at the beach last week and down in Miami, so super warm. I'm in New York now, not so warm. But I'm at the beach and there's a dog in a cone, which is like this I don't know. It looked like a couple 28-year-olds just like chilling on the beach with their dog, but they were just like doing the 28-year-old thing. The dog, so that the sand's like this on the beach, and then it goes down like this at the tide line, like down 3 or 4 feet. The dog, it's this tall, right? It's down at the bottom of that sand, and it can't get up because of the cone, right? And it was the saddest thing ever, man. Like it was just trying to climb.
Yeah, it's a demoralizing thing. As a human, if we put a cone on, it would be immediately defeating. I think my day would be over and I'd want to hide in the closet too. So
all right, guys. So before we get into today's topic, we've known each other almost a year, I think, or around a year. Actually, Ryan, I knew you in the pre-ClickArmor days, right? But tell me about your story and what brought you up to ClickArmor. But we'll talk about ClickArmor later. So actually, why don't we start with you, Scott? Right, because you started in the ClickArmor journey first, and then we'll do Ryan. So
yeah, that's fine.
How'd you get in security? First of all, what led you there, and then what's your story been?
Well, if you're watching live or watching on the video and not on the podcast, you'll see I've been around for a while. I have no hair or not much hair, and it's gray for what's left of it. But so I've been in the industry for quite a while, since way before it was called cybersecurity. And I was an IT security engineer turned cyber psychological pundit, I guess you call it. Somewhere in the early 2000s, after being a software engineer or software product manager, I became a consultant. So I did a lot of work on federal government projects and was doing risk assessments and was doing security architectures and security policies. And after about 6 years of different projects, seeing, there's great security technologies out there, really good project work being done. But every time you did a risk assessment, you would see some unresolved risks, and they always involved humans. It was poor passwords, poorly secured data somehow, right? And so I just got really intrigued with that, and I thought it would be really important to help people understand that after the attackers realize how well everything is secured technologically, they're going to start targeting the people. And so I thought, let's go and talk to them, and nobody really cared or knew about it. So it was kind of funny and futile for a while.
Well, it's funny, you're in this very human-centered space in cyber currently, and I'm sitting at a more the whole landscape space, because we're looking at standards, right? But I'm going to tell you, it sounds like my everyday sounds like your everyday, which is I sit down with people that are formalizing their cybersecurity, maybe for the first time, and I say to them some version of, Yeah, we can't really scan for all of that because 2/3 of cybersecurity is people, and we don't yet have mind reading apps.
Yep.
So we have to ask them, right? We have to talk to them. We have to understand what people are doing. And I think that that's really foreign in our space of technologists, that
Mhm.
so much of what keeps technology safe isn't the technology, it's how people use the technology, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a bit misunderstood or just overlooked, I think. In the MSP space, we worked with a lot of MSPs, and there gets to be a mindset of, well, okay, I'll sell the customer something, I'll turn it on, I'll bill the customer, and everybody's happy. Well, when it comes to security awareness training, there has to be a certain human element there where you learn something about the risk profile of the organization, because not every organization has the same risks. And that's what makes it challenging and makes it fun.
All right, so you're running a company, and you found your way to this space, right? Of not just um, sort of championing cybersecurity in sort of the consulting space, right, or the advisory space, but really now you're a leader in the security space, right? Really leading others to do the same thing. But what do you do in your downtime? Like, do you take your security hat off? What's your favorite hobby?
Oh man, that is a tough one. Click Armor has been my hobby for the last 5 years, put it that way. But before that, sailing, golf,
Sailing.
hockey. Yeah, yeah.
So with actual sails,
With a real sailboat. Yeah, yeah.
real sailboat. So do you own a boat?
I actually used to. I sold it a couple of years ago, but I had a Catalina 22 for about 15 years.
22. So that has a little cabin, right? That you can eat lunch in.
It has a very, very tiny cabin, yes, with a pop top. Actually, the reason I bought it was because we live on the Ottawa River here in Ottawa, Canada, and
Uh-huh.
it's well, I'm not right on the river, but the closest body of water is the Ottawa River, and it kind of is enclosed, so you can't go very far, as you would on a coastal waterway. But I thought I'm going to get bored with a boat in this small space, so I need something I can trailer and move somewhere that's not too expensive or hard. So I got something with a swing keel. I can put it on a trailer, has a pop
Yep.
top, so even though it's a small cabin, you can get headroom. Anyway, all kinds of reasons why I bought the one I did, and then I ended up never actually leaving the Ottawa River. So it was kind of a fair weather sailing experience for the last 15 years.
Well, so you got the swing keel, but like the mast is like a whole nother deal. Like how was that easy to put up?
I would put it up once in the spring. I'd pay for a
Okay.
mooring. We have actually one of the biggest sailing clubs in Canada here in Ottawa. So it's 500 boats, and we had a slip there every year. So I'd put the mast up. It was always an adventure the first of the year getting that done, and then take it down at the end of the year. So
All right.
it was pretty easy to get it in and out of the harbor.
Well, I don't necessarily know that I want to saddle you with the wish that you're going to buy another boat, because I know that that's a bit of a trap. But I do wish that you could get back to that sailing space, because I know that's the fun part, right?
Oh, I would love to as well. Yeah, yeah.
And I think I was going to say, apparently we invited the wrong other Click Armor employee.
Yeah, my co-founder Stephen
was here.
Stephen was my inspiration for taking sailing lessons,
Really?
buying a boat, and now he's still sailing. He basically just cruise on other people's boats. So
He's out on the water.
I was talking to a partner yesterday, and his senior engineer is like lives on a boat most of the year, cruises around like the intercoastal up near Alaska, down to like Washington, and he's just like got Starlink going, and like he's just like boat tech warrior is like his thing.
Yep.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah, no, and you always, if you own a boat, you have what's called 2-foot-itis. You always want a boat that's 2 feet bigger. And the interesting thing is the cost of a boat doubles every 2 feet you add to it.
All right. This isn't the Sailing podcast. Let's Ryan. We sort of got Scott up to current, which is he divested himself of a boat, but he's going to come back to it when he's done with security. But how did you end up in security?
Well, that's a good question. So I've been in sales and kind of development and with startups kind of as my thing. for the better part of my career. Going back to Public Mobile, part of the founding team there, helped build a cell phone company out of nothing. Eventually, we were purchased by TELUS, and I transitioned out and got into some MSP stuff myself, and kind of always had a tech and coding background. During COVID, I kind of further went down the security routes, re-educated myself, and kind of then amalgamated all of my kind of skills and passions into one, which was kind of teaching and educating and cyber and business development and the fun, risky world of startups. So I brought all that kind of together, and I joined my first startup, and that's actually, Matthew, where you and I met. That was they were Nivy, an Indigenous-owned cybersecurity company in Canada, and they were awesome. But unfortunately, didn't make it too far out of the gate. But fortunately, I just met Scott a few weeks before that event, and basically immediately after I was unemployed, I was re-employed. And I think hopefully Scott didn't have to get rid of that sailboat to afford me, but I was the first the person to join the team outside of kind of like the founders and the developers, and took over sales and marketing, and I still help with content development, a lot of the other things, and the technical side of things, so I can keep myself current and in there. But I got here recently in a sense, but have kind of always had the passion, the skill set, and the dabbling, so to speak, in the security world.
All right. Well, I'm before we go into the lecture though, we need to talk about what is your pastime, man? Like when you're not selling cyber, what do you like to have in your life?
Outdoors, not in front of screens, like as disconnected from the world as possible. When I'm online, I'm in it. I love it. I know it. I'm technical, but when I'm offline, it's like, let's get out on the paddleboard. Let's go for a hike. Let's just be outside by the water, nature, and all that fun stuff, hanging out with the dogs and the family, just being outside. I love reading a good book, listening to a good podcast, or, even going through an old comic. Those are keep my brain spinning. I'm always learning. Is, I guess, one of my passions too. So that's kind of me when I'm not click armoring.
All right. Well, I hope you get out there this weekend. Is it raining where you are too? Are you guys near each other?
No, kind of 4 hours apart. Scott's in the Ottawa, and I'm just a couple hours north of Toronto.
So, well, let me ask you before we move on. So, like the last few days, I've been inundated, and I haven't actually done the research to see where it's coming from. I've been choking on Canadian wildfire smoke. So, is that like,
yeah.
Are you smoking me out? Is that like what's happening right now?
No. Well, Canada is smoking you out. Yeah, we'll be smoking out most of America, it looks like. But that's coming from kind of our west coast, more Alberta.
Oh, it's
BC,
all the way on the west coast. Okay.
But it comes across and then down. There's a great website called firesmoke.ca, and you could literally, punch it up and actually watch the plumes of smoke travel across North America. So yeah, it's not as bad as last year, but it seems to be building. And even today here where I am, it's pretty smoky in the air.
Yeah, that's just the new Earth, I think.
Yeah, the unfortunate one.
All right. So before we get into topic of the day, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about CompTIA certifications. You guys ready?
Absolutely.
Ready.
Let's jump in. If the button works when I click it. That was slow. All right, guys. So I was just at CompTIA ChannelCon a couple weeks ago, and like, surprise, there's going to be a bunch of new certifications coming down the pike. Last year they added a bunch of expert certifications. This year they're adding some, I don't want to call them remedial, but early career certifications that maybe even precede your first entry level position. So really great for people that are in college still, or maybe even still in high school and middle school. So that stuff's happening. There's this whole new brand that you guys are going to be hearing about. I don't know if you guys know this. CompTIA puts this like plus sign on the end of a lot of their certifications, and that came from the A plus, which was like the original certification, and A with a capital A. But they're actually creating little a, lowercase a certifications, which come first across the whole spectrum. So that's exciting. Stay tuned. They haven't officially launched it, but it was on stage a couple weeks ago, so I'm happy to blast it out there. let's talk about where they're at right now. What's available today? So today, CompTIA has gone far beyond A+. Security Plus was added several years ago. It is the number one most recommended certification for people who are starting their cybersecurity career. Go get that Security Plus. It will credential you to go get your first cybersecurity job. It's actually, even though it's for an entry-level cyber position, it's actually challenging. And if you don't have the background, you may have to start before that. And you'll see at the top of the screen that there's some things before that. But they've got a bunch of other certifications. So they have them across core technology skills. They have them specifically on IT infrastructure. They've got the new cybersecurity certification focus. They've got a data focus, and there's more of those coming. There's going to be AI soon. And then they've got those professional certifications around, for example, project management. So I'm going to dig in a little bit on the cyber stuff specifically because we're a cyber podcast here. So what's really quite special about the CompTIA certifications is the career track. So A+ was sort of the first and foremost entry-level IT skill, and then they added Network Plus to show that you also could engineer a network, and then they added Security Plus, which was Security Essentials and qualified you for an entry-level cyber job. They also added that IT Foundational, which is a slightly lower bar than an A+, but a good stopping stone on the way. And really, in the last few years, they've added these cybersecurity focused certifications, Pen Test Plus, CISA Plus, and the CAS Plus. So these are really exciting. It's exciting for me because it used to be that Security Plus was the end of the road, and those of us in the security industry didn't take CompTIA's cybersecurity career path very seriously, for CompTIA certifications. So Security Plus was a great starter, but then after that, you'd have to go to another certification brand to get those intermediate and expert level skills. So I love that CompTIA added these. So we're going to zoom in there a little bit, and I'm not going to talk about the ITF because I think that if you're entering the IT workforce and you're not ready for an A+, ITF is a great place to start. But the reality is, if you're going into IT, professional IT, A+ really is the target, right? So right out of school, you should either be ready for your A+, or it's the first thing you should be doing if you're trying to get into IT. If you think you might want to head towards security, Security Plus is the target, but it does depend on a lot of those essential network level skills. So a Network Plus is a great stop along the way. When you do get towards that entry level cyber skill set, they are going to expect in pretty much any security organization that you really understand the theory that goes into information security. So that's how do you architect security? This is not the technology, right? What goes into a security architecture? Well, it's a little bit of governance, maybe there's some standards, maybe there's some concepts in how you arrange things, right? Then there's the engineering. How do you create that secure system? How do you advise people on security? How do you actually implement security? And when you go to administer an actual technology infrastructure, how can you actually configure that, right? So that's what the Security Plus focus is. It's a challenging certification for people that are just starting out in their IT career, but it is basically table stakes for a security job. I'm curious, Ryan and Scott, of the people that you know in the security world, how many of them, came in through, credentials stamped on their profiles versus I just picked this stuff up as an amateur and eventually collected enough knowledge to be considered, reputable in security? Like, are you seeing it like 50-50? What are you guys seeing?
I think it's shifting quite a bit. I mean, in the old days, back when I started, there were not a lot of certifications. First one I got was CISP in 2002, I think. But these ones that are coming along now, I think, are very well designed for people who are moving into the space, without a lot of formal background. So I see probably more people now coming in with some kind of certification.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I've seen it firsthand just because I was recently a TA with the U of T, University of Toronto Cybersecurity Boot Camp, and they actually tie the CompTIA Security Plus with the boot camp admission. And so students have the ability to kind of write that within a couple of years of graduating, and they have all the resources and the access to it and all these different things. So it gives people kind of that ability to grab it if they want to help validate those skills. Because you're right, like people can be extremely intelligent and capable and all that, but sometimes it takes that piece of paper, that graduate, that whatever it has to be to get that job. But I think I'm seeing more and more people with that and going down the certification route, and I think it's a solid decision, and it keeps you current, and it keeps you kind of guided on your career path. So I think it's extremely valuable.
I
I want to kind of second. I like what CompTIA did here and expanded that security branch.
Yeah, I think it's pretty commonly sort of accepted now that you have to have at least one security certification to get in anywhere. But I would also caution it's not that much benefit to get multiple security certifications, right? So
collecting the whole alphabet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It becomes more of a gamified challenge at that point of all the different badges than it is, what's your actual focus, what's your expertise, what do you want to be known as? I think that's a better way to kind of utilize the certs.
So I didn't take certifications in security too seriously until I went and got my CISSP, and so this was back. My journey started at least on the credentialing side in I think 2016, 2015. And I went straight into what's basically considered an expert level certification. But that's not a normal road. And in fact, as Ryan, as you were alluding to, and Scott, as you were alluding to, this is increasingly the case that you're seeing more of this, the need for certifications. So early in my career, that wasn't necessary. It became necessary. And Ryan, I think I conclude with what you were saying to say that I agree, which is I think these days, if you're looking for a job, right, the general expectation is that you have this, right? And so you need to start someplace, and it's a great place to start. So anyway,
it's
after you've got your...
It's like it's like the experience thing now. When they're asking for years of experience and certifications that people can't obtain, they're also, I think, certifications have been used to be a bit of a barrier for some people to get into cyber because it might scare them away or disqualify people from a job that they're definitely qualified for. So I think it's a double-edged sword. We got to be careful sometimes.
It is, particularly those expert level certifications with some of the other brands, and that's the reason why I really like this CompTIA approach, because there's so many levels of ability to access it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the reality is you don't need to go study for these tests for too long. There's probably a CompTIA test and certification for whatever your current level of skill is, and then you get to put it on your application, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, after Security Plus, the reality is there's a lot of differentiated career paths inside cybersecurity, but in CompTIA land, they just have these two roles. They've got the Pen Test Plus, which is mostly offensive security with a bridge into purple. So we would say that this is like the red team stuff with a little bit of purple team focused on defense or how you relate to a defensive security. And then they have the CISA Plus, which is focused on defensive security, right? But then relating to the offensive security. I would say that a lot of people are attracted towards that pen test route. But if you are if you're entry level talent and you are in North America, it's a really difficult place to start out because the entry level pen test positions are not, they don't pay very well. Frankly, you're competing with people all over the planet, and as North American talent or even European talent, it's really difficult to compete with people that are probably brighter than you and smarter than you with more experience than you that are happy to work for like half of what you are willing to work for. So that's a really difficult place to start out. But as you do move into your cybersecurity career, if you can gather the skills for the more sophisticated types of penetration testing and red teaming, there are some really great opportunities there. So I typically don't encourage people to like aim for that as their entry level position, just because the career prospects are so difficult. But it is a great place to end up because there's some really exciting, fun jobs that are quite well paying if you can acquire the skills that frankly take a lot of time to put together.
Yeah. I had 60 students in my last cohort, and when day one, what do you guys want to do? They all want to be like pen testers, red teamers and all this. By the time we got down to it, there was one person ready, at the end of that boot camp to actually walk into a red team role, and he did. But that's or that skill set, that's a different level of knowledge, and I'd have to say to the students, you got to be realistic and you got to work your way up to that level. You can't just graduate and be a pen tester. It's kind of like that, that shiny object that they kind of flash out there.
But I'm glad it's sexy. It brings people into the security world. They get an introduction, right? But
I'm gonna be a hacker.
The thing that we need most of in the world are defenders, right? Yeah.
And one of the most useful skills is telling people you're watching a show with, yeah, you can really do that, or that's fake. You can't do that.
Yeah. All right, and then they have the Cast Plus, and it's no longer new. This is I think we're like 2 years in, but this is exciting because there may be some expert level certifications that have a higher knowledge bar than the Cast Plus out there for some specialized security knowledge. However, the reality is if you can pass the Cast Plus and you are credentialed, you qualify for some of those mid-level roles in cybersecurity. You can go for a management position, right? You can run a team. You can be working in some more sophisticated career paths with that Cast Plus. So that's really interesting. And I hope that CompTIA continues as people gather these Cast Plus, they start asking, well, what's next? I'm hoping that we see some more moves there. So with that, this isn't the CompTIA show. Let's talk about why we're here today. So I brought you guys on because you're experts in cyber awareness generally, right? But if we want to start out one place here, let's talk about phishing simulation. I think that this is a technology that's been around a long time, right? Mm-hmm. And the idea is through becoming aware, right, of what's possible, you can reduce some risk. But I think while people have had these tools available for a number of years, they're maybe not leveraged, effectively or uniformly or consistently enough to really impact. So let's talk about how these things prevent failures, and then maybe we could talk about how these tools are maybe misused or not used well enough or consistently enough to actually result in that risk reduction that we're really looking for. So but I'm not the expert here, so can we start with some war stories? Let's talk about the actual bad things, right? What are the actual bad things?
You mean the actual phishing threats, right, that have caused big or any
that could have been prevented with some really basic awareness, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's unlimited numbers, and it's funny because when I started focusing on this stuff back in 2008, 2009, there were not a lot of news stories about big cyber breaches. Big ones were Heartland, I remember, and then eventually Home Depot and Target, and in the early 2010s, and they were almost always triggered by some kind of either phishing or network attack. It's become less network attacks now, more phishing, right? But there are certainly some of the bigger breaches that we heard about, or the bigger stories that were useful for education. They weren't always phishing stories, right? There was the Conficker virus, which was used, to infect USB drives and disrupt the Iranian military, development of nuclear reactors and things like that. But as we moved into the
features offline.
Yeah. So when between 2010, 2020, or sorry, yeah, that's right, 2020, there were, escalating numbers of phishing attacks. And so it got to be the kind of news stories where you could really just sort of look at it and say, wow, this is the biggest one yet. No, wait, a week later. No, this is the biggest one yet.
You guys saw the news this week, right? There's this database out there crawling around from the last week where
Yep.
they're saying, well, it's actually every U.S.
Social
citizen.
security number. Yep. Yep. Every U.S. citizen
Every
social
US
security
citizen.
number is now available for free
Yeah, not
on
more
a
than
black,
citizens. Anyone with a social security number.
on
Yeah.
a dark website for free, right? So
Yeah.
it's crazy. But yeah, so phishing became really the focus in around 2010, 2012, as more and more people were obviously using email and sending links to things rather than attachments, etc. I mean, attachments were big, but I think links sort of escalated the use of email for attacks. And interestingly, I was actually doing phishing simulations before 2010. So that was before guys like KnowBe4 and Cofense and others were really known. And so I think I was doing it with a Mac, sending individual emails with different URLs in each one to see
Really?
and a landing page with log files that I'd check to see who clicked on these things. And that actually came out of a project that I started earlier where I was dropping USB drives around. I called it the Honey Stick Project. And it was just a way of generating knowledge or interest when I was teaching courses to say, here's what people can do with devices or with phishing messages, etc. And so,
wait, let's slow down there. There's
Yeah.
some interesting stories there. First of all, I want to talk about the Honey Stick project in a moment, but I think a lot of people watching here are pretty technical, right? And they've heard the word phishing over and over and over for the last 20 years, and I think even the general public is sort of familiar with that word, even if they don't understand the exact definition.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of engineers have become maybe deaf or blind to the fact that the general public still really doesn't understand. They don't understand the risk. They don't really understand the vector. They don't really understand what phishing even means. Like, what's the difference between phishing and vishing and whatever else, right? And it's clear by looking at the Verizon breach report, like phishing's not going away, right?
Yeah.
Identity, like stolen, like legitimate credentials was the biggest commonality in attacks over the last year. Same the year before that. And if you peel that open a little bit further and you look at, well, how do they get a hold of these identities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like phishing's the biggest tool. So like it's not going away. There's been you're talking about a day before these tools even became available,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's still really early days because we have a whole generation like of the public that still is not really aware how they can prevent themselves. What are they actually not supposed to do? I think there's still this lightning strike mentality of, what do you mean don't click on links? I get links all day. I have to click on things. I just had to subscribe to this thing and had to click on a link. So when you say don't click on links, like that's what an engineer says to a user, right?
Yep.
They're like, what are you talking about? Don't click on links. What do you want to just like not? I'll just sit here at my desk. That's cool.
I know.
Like
I think I hear you in the problem there too, because I think we've done a fantastic job of the corporate world being educated about phishing, right? That's why we're here. That's why we exist. But that is only a small portion of the world and how attackers end up getting into your account. Like a lot of people, like social media influencers. I don't know any, but that's got to be a very popular job right now. That your only job would be to click links, right? Like, so I mean, there's certain elements of like, how would I do my job if I'm not allowed to click links? I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to keep clicking links, right? And I think that's a part of the problem here.
There's a simple saying I have, which is links are life, right? Everything you do today now involves a link. You can't tell people don't click links. And some of the things that are happening right now really are pointing to the fact that we are all going to have to become better at managing risks personally. Regardless of how good the AI-based technologies are, the attackers actually have an advantage because every time we increase our technical capability, we're actually adding another Band-Aid. And we're never going to be able to go back and reinvent and redesign our entire infrastructure to be secure by design. And so it's a very daunting task to expect technology to prevent every phishing event. You can detect them and you can respond to them when they are clicked and they shouldn't have been, but you can probably not prevent it. I think there's a really important disconnect, obviously, between what the average Joe citizen believes about what's possible in technology and what our technical professionals believe people should have to do and what they should know and what they do know. So there's a huge disconnect there.
I think there's also one quick extra element,
Yeah.
and that's how a lot of these security tools are now being marketed to people, and the use or incorrect use of AI security and all these things. We're giving people a false sense of protection. Again, we're not, Scott, you said you used the word Band-Aid. Exactly. We're just putting Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids. We're not, again, going back down to the source and being like, this is the threat. This is how we prevent it. This is why. We're just being like, don't worry, your phone has 7 layers of AI and you're fine. Like, am I?
Well, we have, and so the audience listening right now, mostly MSPs, MSSPs, service providers. And the last few years, we've been selling SIMSOC, SOAR, MDR, XDR, like whatever. And our customers are less safe than they were 5 years ago. So
right.
It's nice that everybody will admit that, but yeah.
So let's just rewind all the way back to I guess before what would that have been? 2014,
2011, 2010.
2011. Okay.
Yeah.
So 2011, you're experimenting with these methods, and I think everyone these days has either recognized, everyone watching this certainly has recognized a phishing attempt or spear phishing attempt, or they've participated in simulation or both, and probably on a regular basis, like we see these things, right? So I think there's this basic understanding that simulation is a piece of an awareness campaign that frankly is actually required by law. It's like part of the cybersecurity standards, insurers require it. So like this is not really optional. It's, in contractual verbiage, it's in law, it's in like your cyber, disclosures that you're to get a policy bound. But like in detail, and in theory, I understand all the components, which is you can do simulation and you can send these sort of real looking emails so that people can recognize what they look like, and recognize what are the things they're supposed to be looking for, or recognize the moments where they didn't see those things, right? But then there needs to be like the other half of that of, okay, this person needs more education, right? So describe to me the evolution from 2011 to now, because we're basically 15 years, 20 years into this journey, or 15 years into this journey, right? Of going through this methodology, right? What did it look like in the beginning? What have we learned along the way? What is best practice now?
Yeah. It's a really good question. And, it's funny when you ask, what have we learned? Well, it doesn't seem like some people have learned a lot, but there's definitely learning to be had. In fact, I did an entire series of videos about what I called the phishing assessment optimizer. And it was a whole bunch of, at the time, I was much more negative about the whole process. I had used some of the biggest tools in the world for testing organizations of 10,000, 20,000 people. And I found it very difficult to get good results in terms of reliable data, without getting backlash from users, and without having sort of unexpected costs and things come up. And so over the period of 2012 to 2015, I was looking at, what do you need to do to actually do these things efficiently and get good results? And so when I started teaching people this, they would say, well, yeah, that's really interesting. But then, of course, all I really need to do to get my insurance or to get my certification, SOC 2, whatever, is show them that I did one, right? And so they defaulted back to the easiest, and it really is technically very easy to launch phishing simulations. It's not that easy to get good data and good results out of them.
But what are those pieces that you think are essential that are oftentimes missing?
Man, if there's, first of all, I'll share a URL that people can go to so they can actually see the videos, because I spent around an hour talking about these in detail. But
Put it in the private chat. I'll put it right up on the screen.
Oh, sure.
I just put it up on the iPad right here.
That okay.
That's it there.
You can,
Actually, yeah, that's it.
you guys can type in that really long URL if you want.
Actually, I've got a shorter one. I just put a redirect. So there it is. clickarmor.ca/phishsim. So yeah, essentially there are 12 to 15 major areas that I found that were challenging to get right. And you've got to try and optimize these things all together. So number one is things like your filters, right? So you have to whitelist or allow list all of the source IPs that you're sending your phishing simulations from. If you're doing live phishing simulations, you'll hear me describe live simulations because that's not the only kind of phishing simulation. What I prefer to talk about in terms of context, as you said, Matthew, it's just a piece of what you really should be doing. There are what we call immersive phishing simulations we can talk about later. But the point here is, yeah, the filters will skew your data. Sometimes they will basically trigger the links to see if they are dangerous. They'll do them in a sandbox or something like that. They'll detonate them. So you have to set those things up so they don't do that. And by the way, you're basically telling your SOC to turn off security so that you can measure the security behaviors of people, which sounds a little bit weird. The other things that those filters will do is or other things that can happen technically is you may not actually get links to or even get the whole message to the end user. So there's whole fractions of your organization that may not even receive the message, and that will skew your data because they haven't seen it, they haven't clicked on it. So some people will say, well, that's good that they didn't click on it, but they don't know that the people never even saw it. So that's a very obvious one.
And you need to make sure that they actually opened it. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And you need to redeliver or what?
Well, yeah, then you can't really redeliver. You can try, but you have to first of all make sure that it was not delivered, right? And it's very rare that when that happens, actually not true. Sometimes we've been able to detect, when I've done it on projects with people, you say, okay, you know what, this gateway for this division of the organization blocked everything. So yeah, we'll unblock it and resend it to all those people. So that's a pain in the butt. It all adds up to cost of delivering these things. Technically, to actually set up a template for an email and a landing page and upload the users and then launch it is very simple. But a lot of the cost of it goes into designing the template of the email, because if you're sending an email, you're trying to send something that's relevant to people, that will trigger something that will compel them to normally say, well, you know what, this is interesting, I might click on it. And then you want them to actually evaluate that process in their head and say, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe what's my security policy say I should do, right? And everything that you do in that template message can affect whether people decide to click or not. One letter or some change of word in the subject line can determine whether they even open it. And that can skew the data. And so it doesn't really make sense for people to be saying, well, my click rate was 32.4%, which is a terrible click rate usually. But there's a whole lot of variables like that really have to be controlled. And in some cases really can't be controlled. It comes down to how you want to actually use the exercise itself. If you're using it to measure vulnerability of your staff, my recommendation is that you do it at a very high level, at an aggregate level, rather than trying to isolate it down to who clicked on a link in a particular campaign. What you might see is somebody might have clicked multiple links on multiple campaigns. Then you have a little more assurance that maybe they didn't really get what they should be doing. But there's a lot of time wasted getting down to that last decimal point on how many people clicked.
Okay, so wait, let's pause there. What I'm hearing, if I strip away all the phishing words and the security words, what I'm hearing is that this is a business activity, and like any other type of business activity, if you're going to be aligning with best practices to optimize an outcome, you need to measure it, and then you need to use those measurements to and we should probably talk about what we use those measurements to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this case, but you use those measurements to then enact strategy or further, put process improvement in place, or maybe keep numbers where they need to be, right? So this is a data exercise.
Yes.
And it's something that requires management, and it requires specialization in collecting the data, understanding the data, interpreting the data, and then deciding on what the action should be based on that data.
Yep.
That sounds like a lot to expect out of small businesses.
Yeah.
Presumably, that's where our service provider partners, can really find an opportunity, right, to invest in their craft and develop their craft to the point where they're delivering business value that's really going to keep their customers safe, and of course, like bill for it, right, for the pleasure of business.
Well, it's much like a pen test, Matthew. A lot of people pay for pen tests because they have to, regulatory XYZ. They think they need to. A friend tells them you better go get a pen test, right? You do the pen test, and then you get this big report, and it sits on the shelf. Right, you don't action it. You don't go through it with a fine tooth comb. You don't take all the recommendations and put them into your workflow. Right, that's what a lot of people do with phishing sims. They do the sim. They're like, look at this, 35% clicked. Okay, what's for lunch? You're like, well, no. Like, what? We have to actually do something with this data. We have to make use of this. And the fact that we tricked our employees, that we had to whitelist all these different things, that we had to do all this configuration and build up. Like, we better do something with the data that's useful. Like, let's, move forward with it. And I think that's kind of, what we like to preach and talk about.
If I put my security hat on, I can imagine like a few different things you could do with this data, which is, you could target your training or even customize your training. You could use it for threat modeling to understand where the risk is in your organization, and maybe use other types of compensating controls. If you understand that this risk exists, maybe that's actually an indicator that should be used to justify other types of security investments, or indicate other types of security investments, right?
Yep.
Well, you can use it. You can go into a tabletop exercise based on the results to, really hone in on that attack vector or that specific metric that was working too much. There's a lot of valuable things you can do in the security, world.
It sounds like the base that you can really create a whole advisory practice around. So let's talk about what those things are more specifically. What do you do after you have this data, Scott?
Well, actually, I want to make sure we actually meet the promise of this session, which was 3 ways that you could. What was the actual 3 ways phishing simulations can prevent cyber awareness failures? Right. So I have some.
All right, let's hit
identifiable things. Then we'll get back to your question. So number 1 is fairly obvious. It's kind of what we've been talking around, and that is that it helps demonstrate the value and necessity of awareness training, right? Regardless of what your click rates are, it's a data point that sometimes will shock people, or maybe just provide some justification to say, you know what, I thought we were better than that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is it's a way to measure and act on human vulnerabilities. As Ryan said, with pen tests, you basically identify where are my vulnerabilities, and then you make recommendations on what you can do to remediate them. And hopefully you're taking that extended action after you do the measurement and celebrate your click rates. But also, it's an opportunity to train those people who need training, and to then, from an MSP point of view, you're looking for opportunities to add training and add value for customers. So if you actually have a metric that says your people are vulnerable, I can actually offer you something that addresses that particular vulnerability for that particular use case or that particular part of the organization. And then I have one more bonus one, and that is MSPs can actually use phishing simulations and training as a way to engage users without actually having to talk to every one of them, right? So that's one thing that we found, is that whole idea of, let's convince the customer that this is valuable for them, provide the service, and then bill them. But a lot of times the MSP's services are not that visible to the end users. And so when you have something like phishing simulations that are done well and in a respectful way, and then training that goes with it, then you actually have an opportunity to have a face and a reason to speak with individual employees at your customers. So those are the 3 + 1 bonus ways that we were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I could see pairing that activity up with, and this is why you guys have to have multi-factor auth on that you're complaining about all the time, right?
Yeah.
Because it is. Yeah.
So it's a valid point. Yeah, it tells another good story. You can always piggyback it.
Well, I just want to keep digging here, but why don't we give you guys an opportunity to talk about Click Armor? So, Scott, at what point were you like, well, I have to put a brand name on this? Like, how did that happen?
Well, yeah. So around 2015, 2016, I've been doing live training. I had a very weak, simple little LMS, or learning management system, that I was deploying to my clients that they would just point them at, and it would have basic content on phishing and passwords and ransomware and all this stuff. And then it would quiz them. And I could tell, even though my customers were saying good stuff, perfect, level of technical detail, what we wanted, but I could tell people really weren't paying much attention. And after they did the quiz, they kind of forgot it right away. And you only did it once a year. So it was kind of useless. And it didn't really serve my vision when I left the sort of technical part of the security consulting world to do this kind of thing, to really help people learn to manage risks better. And so when I decided we wanted to do something about it, people would say to me, well, have you thought about gamification? Have you thought about how we could make this stuff more fun? And I think I wrote my first Jeopardy game in HTML and JavaScript in like 2012 or something like that. But it wasn't an enterprise thing. It wasn't scalable. But I did a lot of research around 2015, 2016, reading on these things. And I came across a model called Octalysis. And it was designed by a gamer named Yukai Chow. You can read it. It's pretty cool. He's got a book called Actionable Gamification. I'll just put the title here. And once that sort of hit me, I had this sort of vision. What we would do is we would create a new learning management system that is gamified. It's built on a game engine, and it lets you make every part of that learning experience more engaging and more motivating for people. It's interactive. And in addition to just getting people to pay attention better, there are ways you can actually use this to put people into an immersive risk scenario. So rather than sending live phishing messages out, which disrupts operations sometimes, and as I said, has a whole bunch of costs and things you have to take care of, if you can deploy a simulation that is immersive, then it's like deploying training from an operations point of view. It's no different. It's inexpensive, but it actually engages people with much more interactivity, more feedback, and allows you to prepare them and make them ready for testing in the real world or facing real risks in the real world. So in a nutshell, when we came to creating Click Armor around 2018, 2019, I did some brand searches, and this seemed like the closest one I could get to that said what I wanted. And it allows us to kind of paint the picture, not just phishing, but all of cybersecurity.
So that was your birth story. Ryan, do you want to sum up the value prop today? Before we go there, I just want to tee up this thing, right? So we have a LinkedIn user who's talking about how the need to use this data, right? You need to use this data. And the end doesn't fit here, but it says to help protect the business, to make better decisions to help protect the business. But I think that there's a bigger thing here, which is the revenue opportunity, right? I mean, there's an opportunity for service providers to actually create value, like when they take the data and do something with it, right? Yeah. Not only is that of value to their end customer, right, but it can help that end customer then make other decisions, right, that may increase the value capture. So, Ryan, give us the pitch here.
Yeah, I mean the pitch of why I think MSPs should be like selling our product, it's imperative, and as you said, this training is mandatory, right? People need it, people want it. So let's bring what I consider the best, gamified, interactive, and immersive version of that to the customer's table. So we provide the realistic phishing simulations, right? So we can bring that home to customers. So that's customizable phishing sims that mimic real world attacks. They help employees learn in a safe environment. So that's key. This hands-on approach ensures they are better prepared for actual threats. So then another good reason, again, interactive and engaging training. Like that's what we do at our core. So our platform uses gamification and interactive modules to make learning fun and memorable. Employees are more likely to retain information and apply it to their daily work, which comes down to retention. as we see, if employees love our platform, get addicted to our platform, they want it, then the organization is more likely to renew that subscription, right? And so again, this brings it back to the revenue opportunities to grow and build. And comprehensive reporting and analytics. It's something we do really well as well. We allow you to track your progress, identify areas for improvement. We've got different functionalities like groups, and we can do targeted learning. We do custom learning. There's a lot of reasons I think why MSPs and ClickArmor have been getting along. It's because we provide such a turnkey, easy solution that's very automated. Has very little barriers, but is gamified, immersive, interactive, and it's fresh. It's a fresh security awareness tool that I think is kind of game changing. Pardon the pun. But as far as kind of working with our partners and MSPs quickly, we're scalable. There's really no limit to how many users we can put on. MSPs get their own tenant and get to create their own subsites and manage everything in the cloud through Microsoft Azure. So we support single sign-on, and again, like a lot of the automated tools help MSPs deploy us to many seats and many customers to really drive that revenue without a lot of effort. And I think that's one of our big benefits.
Now, Scott, I know that you guys have this idea of ongoing content, right? So, talk to me about these regular weekly challenges.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is pretty obvious, when you put somebody through a foundational training course, there's a lot of information going to them in a very short period of time. And it is hard for them to just absorb it, let alone remember it. And so what we have with each of our foundational courses is a series of 3-minute challenges that basically are like mini immersive simulations. So we have a phishing virtual inbox where people basically sort 3 messages based on analyzing the senders, the links, the body content. And we have sort of graphic novel, what we call social scenarios that would go with a social engineering course. And so essentially every week you're reinforcing people's knowledge, but in a fun way. People don't really know what to expect. It's not like, oh, here's another boring quiz I got to do after each week. There's something new that relates to the foundational training that they've had, and it is immersive and fun.
Well, that's great. I know one of the things that really resonated to me earlier, maybe like 20 minutes ago, you were talking about how people take this training once a year and then like they think they're good, right?
Yeah.
But it's really important to make sure that they retain the training, right? And to measure it, right? And frankly, of some of these LMS systems, like I've seen it, like you do the 10-minute module or whatever. People pay attention, not pay attention. They're just like checking their Facebook feed while they're watching training on their phone. And then like you get to the spot where it asks the question, they click the wrong answer, and like the platform's like, nope, that's wrong. And then they just click the right answer, or like they're not necessarily engaged, right?
Exactly.
The fact that you're continuously measuring here sounds like a way to really
and think about
awareness training happen.
And in the future, threats evolve, right? So it's not just what we taught you in October. It's December, a new threat comes out. We can actually simulate those in an immersive way, so you can experience them.
This is
like our courses are always updating. And our courses update, and we like our course around social engineering. We recently updated it last year after the MGM attack, and so we actually took the MGM attack context and put it in the course to help bridge the gap. So when you are just a user who's kind of outside of security and IT trying to learn about social engineering, you've likely heard the MGM attack on the news. Now it kind of brings that context. It's real. You could be a part of the problem, right? So I better pay attention. And that also really drives our interactivity, and also then year over year training for retention for MSPs. Our content is evolving and changing, right? So you can have them every month on the ClickArmor platform. You're billing them a monthly subscription, and you're rolling that over year as the business grows. You're adding seats. You can obviously tell the story from here and understand that I'm the sales guy.
That's why I hired him.
We're all sales guys on this show. All right. So thanks, guys. I appreciate digging into this. You've maybe there was a period of years, guys, where I was just so down about the cybersecurity awareness training because I knew how necessary it was. But organizations didn't take it seriously, or where they did take it seriously, it wasn't effective. So I'm really happy to see some champions getting out there, like working on like really just like the edge of effectiveness, right?
Mhm.
Making sure this stuff is working.
Yep.
That is critical. So thank you for joining us. Next week, we are having Parander Das from Sotero. He's going to be talking about how data breaches affect consumers. We're also going to be talking about ISO 27K. I can't wait for that. So everyone, feel free to come back next week. Like our content, subscribe out on YouTube. Until then, thank you everyone, and thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks, Matthew. Been a pleasure.
All right.
Thanks, Matt. Take care.
Bye everyone.